Welcome to Lost Wilderness. Before we begin, take a moment to subscribe. New scary stories are posted regularly, and let me know in the comments where you're listening from, whether you're driving, working, or alone at night. Now, let's begin. The three of us had been talking about doing a real trip together since we were kids. Back when we should get out there sometime, still felt like the kind of promise life would eventually make room for. By our early 30s, it had become obvious that if we didn't force it to happen, it never would. So in late summer, we took 3 days off, loaded our packs, and headed for Yosemite with no campsite reservations, no big itinerary, and no plan beyond hiking by day, camping wherever made sense by night, and getting a few quiet days away from jobs, traffic, phones, and everything else that had made the years move faster than any of us liked. It was me, my two best friends from high school, Evan and Marco, and the dogs. Evan had brought his Rottweiler, Diesel, a 110-pound wall of muscle with a blocky head and the gentlest temperament I'd ever seen in a dog that size. Marco brought his Australian Shepherd, Sadie, 60 pounds of speed, intelligence, and constant alertness. Both dogs were friendly, social, and easy around people, but if something felt wrong, they noticed it long before we did. The first day of the hike was exactly what we wanted it to be. Long miles, high country views, granite faces glowing under the afternoon sun, pine wind, cold water crossings, and that strange mental quiet that only comes after you've been moving through wilderness for hours. We hiked until the light started thinning and found a decent flat stretch tucked among trees beneath a long rise of granite and broken brush. It wasn't an established site, just a clean piece of ground with enough room for the three of us, the dogs, and a small stove setup. We made dinner, talked about old classmates we hadn't thought about in years, and watched Diesel sprawl like a bear near the packs while Sadie kept making little loops at the edge of camp before returning to check on us. Nothing about the evening felt off at first. No weird sounds, no other hikers, no smell of smoke from another camp. Just the usual nighttime shift in the forest when the light drains away and everything beyond camp becomes suggestion rather than detail. We were halfway through arguing about which one of us had the worst taste in music back in high school when Sadie stopped moving. She had been nosing around near a cluster of boulders. Then all at once she froze. One front paw lifted, body pointed uphill. Diesel raised his head too. Not growling, just staring. We all followed their line of sight, but at first I saw nothing except trees and the dark bulk of the ridge above us. The slope ran up maybe 500 yards or so to a cliff band and a scatter of broken rock near the edge. Evan squinted and said, "You see that?" I didn't until he pointed higher. Then I caught it, a small shape near the rocks, not moving much, too squared off to be natural. I stood up and walked a few steps closer to the edge of camp. That was when the shape shifted just enough for fading light to catch glass, not binoculars. A scope. The man was lying prone near the cliff edge above us with a long rifle pointed down toward camp. Even from that distance, the posture was unmistakable. He wasn't glassing the valley. He wasn't looking at birds. He was looking directly at us. I felt something cold move through my chest. Marco stood up beside me and said very calmly, "Tell me that isn't what I think it is." It was. The man stayed there another few seconds, then backed off the edge and disappeared behind the rock. No wave, no shout, no acknowledgement that he had just been caught aiming a scoped rifle down at three strangers and two dogs in the Yosemite backcountry. We all started talking at once after that, trying to force the situation into a version that made sense. Hunter? Impossible there. Photographer with a weird angle? Not with that posture and that rifle. Somebody messing around? Maybe, but no version of messing around made it feel better. Evan wanted to break camp immediately and move in the dark. Marco said that was exactly how people got lost or injured. I stood there staring at the cliff line, trying to decide whether it was worse that the man had been watching us or that the moment we noticed him, he had slipped away without a word. In the end, we stayed, but no one slept right. We put the tents lower under the trees, killed every light early, and kept our voices down. Diesel and Sadie stayed closer than usual, both dogs rising every time one of us moved. At one point, sometime after midnight, I woke to find Diesel sitting upright facing the ridge, his outline black against the faint sky through the trees. He didn't bark. He just watched the darkness uphill as if he knew something we didn't. By morning, I had almost convinced myself the whole thing had been one of those wilderness moments that becomes bigger in your head after dark. Then we started breakfast, and a bullet hit the boulder 10 feet from the stove. The shot cracked across camp so hard and flat that for one frozen second my brain refused to process what had happened. Then chips of stone sprayed across the ground. Marco dropped the pan, Sadie barked sharply, and Diesel lunged to his feet with a roar that felt too big to come from one animal. Evan yelled, "Down!" And all three of us hit the ground at the same time. A second shot slammed into a tree trunk behind where we'd been sitting, and that erased any last bit of doubt. The man from the ridge wasn't watching anymore. He was trying to kill us. Breakfast went everywhere. Our stove tipped over. One pot rolled uselessly into brush. I crawled behind a deadfall log with Evan while Marco dragged two packs by their straps through the dirt, trying to get them under cover. The dogs were losing their minds now, but not in panic. Diesel was barking uphill with his whole body braced forward, while Sadie moved fast and low between us, checking one person, then another, then snapping her attention back toward the slope. Another shot cracked and slapped dirt somewhere behind the tents. Whoever he was, he had a line on camp and enough elevation to keep pressure on us every time we moved. "He's still up high," Evan said. "Same ridge or close to it." Marco hissed, "How the hell is this happening?" Nobody had time to answer. We had seconds, maybe less, to choose between staying pinned until he walked the shots in closer or moving before he could adjust. Evan made the decision first. "We break downhill through the timber, fast. Stay under cover, don't bunch up." Marco nodded. I did too. None of us needed persuading. We grabbed what we could: packs, water, med kit, one tent bag, the satellite communicator clipped to Marco's shoulder strap, and left everything else. Another shot hit somewhere behind the fallen log as we moved, and then we were running. The slope below camp dropped into thicker forest, cut by granite shelves, brush pockets, and narrow game trails. We went hard downhill with the dogs weaving around us, Evan in front, Marco behind me, both of them doing exactly what people do when fear strips away hesitation. They got efficient. No wasted movement, no extra words, just motion. We put maybe 100 yards between us and camp before the next shot came. Lower now, from a different angle. That was the first clue that made the entire situation worse. He was moving too. He wasn't just taking long shots from one perch. He was following. We cut left across the slope, trying to put denser timber between us and the line of fire. Diesel stayed close to Evan, occasionally ranging a little ahead and then coming right back, while Sadie moved constantly, trotting ahead to check the trail, then circling back to Marco as if she needed to physically confirm he was still there. Another shot hit a tree above us, and bark rained down. Marco cursed. "He's close enough to see movement." Evan said, "Then stop giving him clean movement." We dropped lower, using brush and boulders as cover, but the terrain was brutal. Yosemite looks open and majestic from postcards. On the ground, moving fast through the wrong part of it feels like trying to escape through broken architecture, built by something that doesn't care whether humans can pass. Granite shelves forced us into funnels. Fallen timber forced us to climb over or detour. Loose rock shifted under every other step. We finally ducked into a shallow wash, choked with manzanita and scree, and stopped long enough for Marco to key the satellite communicator. No signal lock. He tried again. Nothing. Evan looked uphill through the brush and said, "He's driving us where he wants." I knew he was right because every time we changed direction, another shot or movement from above shaped us back downhill and east, away from the broader trail system we'd planned to reconnect with later that afternoon. Whoever this man was, he either knew the terrain or he was making very lucky decisions under pressure. Then Sadie let out a different bark. Not warning, tracking. She had moved 10 yards upslope from the wash and was staring into a seam in the brush. Diesel joined her instantly, body low, deep chest rumble building. None of us had even heard the approach. That was the second clue. The shooter wasn't alone. A man burst through the manzanita with a rifle slung and a handgun half raised, probably trying to close on us while the long-range shooter kept us pinned. Diesel hit him before he got the pistol level. The impact knocked the man sideways into the rocks, and Sadie came in right behind, biting at his wrist and forearm so fast it looked like she was made of springs and teeth. Evan tackled the weapon away, while Marco drove a knee into the man's ribs hard enough to take the rest of the fight out of him. It lasted maybe 5 seconds. When it was over, the man was bleeding from both arms, wheezing on the rocks, and the dogs were standing over him, with every friendly quality gone from their bodies. He looked up at us and said the one thing I did not want to hear in that moment. "You should have kept running." Then another shot cracked from uphill, closer than ever, and the fight really started. The bullet hit somewhere in the wash behind us, spraying gravel against my calves. Evan shouted for the dogs off the man, and both of them disengaged instantly, which would have impressed me under any other circumstances. Instead, all I felt was the hard certainty that we were now dealing with at least 2 attackers in terrain they had chosen better than we had. Marco kicked the downed man's handgun farther into the brush and grabbed the rifle sling to drag it away too, but the man lunged with more fight left in him than any of us expected. Sadie snapped back in first and clamped onto his wrist before he could reach the weapon. He screamed. Diesel hit him across the chest again and pinned him flat. "Leave him," Evan yelled. "Move!" We did. None of us wanted to stay in that wash 1 second longer than necessary. We broke east through the manzanita with the dogs alongside us, leaving the injured attacker howling behind. If his partner wanted to hit us from above now, he'd have to do it while risking the man on the ground. That bought us maybe a minute, maybe less. The terrain changed again as we pushed into thicker timber, broken by granite outcrops and deadfall. We climbed not because uphill was smart under fire, but because the slope to our right rose toward a broken ridge that might finally block the shooter's sight line. Every step burned. Packs slammed against our shoulders. Branches tore at our sleeves. Sadie kept glancing back downhill, while Diesel stayed glued to Evan's leg until something in the woods ahead caught his attention and stiffened his entire body. Evan saw it too. He stopped so abruptly I nearly hit him. "Down," he said, voice low and flat. We dropped behind a chunk of granite just as movement flashed between the trees 20 yards ahead. Another man, different clothing, no attempt at hiding now. He came through the trees with a rifle in hand, moving fast to cut us off before we reached the ridge. Marco fired first and missed, the shot smashing bark off a cedar just behind him. The man ducked hard and fired back, forcing all 3 of us flatter against the stone. The dogs exploded into barking. Diesel tried to launch around the granite, but Evan caught his collar for half a second, redirected him, then let go. It was enough. Instead of charging straight into the rifle line, Diesel cut left through brush and disappeared from sight. Sadie stayed closer, circling behind us, frantic but controlled, watching both the man ahead and the slope behind like she understood we were being squeezed. The attacker moved again, trying to flank around the right side of the granite. Evan leaned out, fired once, and drove him back, but not before another shot came from farther downhill. The long-range shooter had a new angle. We were in a pocket now, pinned between at least two armed men. I remember the thought very clearly because it was so simple. This is where people disappear. Not in some dramatic movie scene, but like this, in brush, on granite, with shots cracking from different elevations while the forest swallows all the sound after each report. Then came the barking, not Sadie's sharp herding bark, Diesel's full-body attack bark, close and violent and moving fast. It hit from the left side of the timber where none of us could see him, followed by a man's scream so raw it cut through the gunfire completely. The attacker ahead stumbled backward out of cover, trying to turn toward the dog, and Marco hit him square in the shoulder with his next shot. The man dropped his rifle and vanished into the brush, still yelling. Evan didn't hesitate. Now! We broke from behind the granite and sprinted uphill toward the ridge. Sadie ran with us, then doubled back for a second to snap at something moving in the brush behind Marco before catching up again. Diesel reappeared out of nowhere 10 yards later, blood on his muzzle that was not his, eyes lit with the kind of focused drive that says a switch has flipped. We gained the ridge and finally got what we needed. Broken terrain, huge slabs of granite, and a drop on the far side dense enough to cut visual contact. For the first time since breakfast, no shots came immediately after we moved. We used that gap to push hard down the other side into a chute lined with trees and boulders. Marco tried the satellite communicator again on the move. Still no lock. Evan kept scanning ahead and said, "There's a creek below. Follow it north. It should tie into a maintained trail." "Should?" I said. "That's what we have." We reached the creek 20 minutes later. Lungs shredded, legs shaking, nerves shot raw. The water was shallow but fast enough to make every step uncertain. Evan angled us into it anyway. "Tracks," he said. "Make it harder." So we ran in the water, boots slipping on stone, dogs splashing beside us, while above the creek banks the forest seemed to hold its breath and listen. No shots, no voices. That silence was almost worse. It meant they were still there somewhere, still adjusting, still trying to figure out where we had gone. And then, far downstream through the trees, I saw the impossible thing I had been hoping for since the first shot hit camp. A wooden trail sign. We came out of the creek in a mess of soaked boots, torn pants, scratches, and adrenaline, and almost crashed into the sign because none of us trusted it at first. A maintained trail, narrow, dusty in spots, but real. Official Yosemite post, mileage marker, directional arrow. Civilization in the only form the backcountry offers before roads and buildings. Marco checked the communicator one more time while Evan kept watch, and I held both dogs by their collars because, now that the trail was open, they wanted to move fast. The communicator finally locked long enough to push a distress ping and a clipped message. "Armed men hunting hikers, Yosemite wilderness. 2 dogs, 3 males. Need law enforcement now." Marco looked up and said, "It's sent." I have never loved 3 words more. We still had no idea how long the ping would take to reach anyone or whether the men chasing us were close enough to hear us if we relax, so we didn't celebrate. We moved. North on the trail, fast but controlled, downhill through sections of dense pine and granite, every switchback feeling too exposed. Twice we heard movement off-trail and stopped dead, only to realize it was deer breaking through brush. Once Diesel growled low and stared into the trees for a full 10 seconds before easing off. None of us spoke much after that. We were too busy listening. After maybe 40 minutes, we heard the sound we'd been straining for without knowing it. Voices that didn't belong to us. More than one. Calm, conversational, trail users, day hikers, or backpackers. human noise with no threat in it. We pushed around the next bend and saw them. 4 people with trekking poles and bright packs moving uphill toward us. The look on their faces when they saw the 3 of us told me exactly how bad we looked. Evan got to them first and said, "Turn around. Now." Armed men behind us. There was no confusion after that. Their leader, a woman maybe in her 40s, took one look at Diesel and Sadie keyed up, one look at the blood on our sleeves and packs, and pulled out a phone. No service for a voice call, but emergency text was enough to start something moving. We stayed together from there, a 7-person knot with 2 dogs, and everyone looking into the trees more than they wanted to. 20 minutes later, we met the first ranger coming in with a law enforcement officer behind him. I don't think I fully believed we were out until I saw the rifles, the badges, and the absolute change in posture that came over Evan II. Other armed professionals entered the equation. We gave statements right there on the trail while the officers split teams and moved back toward the ridge, the creek, and our abandoned camp. Diesel and Sadie finally started coming down from the edge they'd been riding all day, though both still watched the woods like they expected the men to come through them one more time. By evening, we were down at a ranger station giving full reports, drinking bad coffee with trembling hands and trying to reconstruct the order of events. They sent search teams. They swept the ridge, the wash, the creek line, and the trail corridors. They found blood where the dogs had hit the first man. They found a dropped handgun. They found shell casings from at least 2 firearms and signs of multiple people moving off trail in a coordinated pattern. What they did not find, at least not that night or the next day, were the men. Whoever they were, they knew that country well enough to break contact and vanish once the hunt turned against them. The official line later was that law enforcement believed there were at least 2 suspects and possibly more. We knew better. We had seen enough to understand the man with the scope had not been improvising. He had watched us from 500 yards on that first night through glass, chosen his ground, and started the next morning by firing into breakfast like we were game. If the first day had belonged to us, the second had belonged entirely to them until the dogs started wrecking the plan. That was the part none of us stopped thinking about. Diesel and Sadie were sweet dogs, friendly dogs, the kind of dogs strangers asked to pet at trailheads. But once danger showed up, both of them flipped from companions into protectors without hesitation. Diesel broke the first attacker's confidence the second he hit him in the wash. Sadie, 60 pounds of speed and fury, kept buying seconds every time someone tried to close on us. Without them, I do not believe all 3 of us make it out. Even after we got back home, showered, and tried to return to normal life, Yosemite felt change in my head. I still think about that first night sometimes, the shape on the cliff, the glass catching the last light, the way he backed away the moment we noticed him. The hunt had started long before the first shot. We just didn't know it yet. And somewhere out there are men who spent a day stalking 3 hikers through the California wilderness and came within reach of it, only to lose the moment they met 2 dogs that loved us enough to fight like hell when it mattered. Thank you for spending your time with Lost Wilderness. If you enjoy slow, immersive horror stories, subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Wherever you're listening from, have a safe night.